can you help us understand what's the significance of UFOs? Like,
they're not coming from, well, I should say it this way. The significance of UFOs is multiple parts, but number one, it's not what you think it is. It's not coming from other planets. The evidence doesn't suggest that.
Interdimensional.
Yes. And the reason is because time is time is parallel. It's not linear. Or it's not like we start here and go forward in time. Time is side by side, which means everything in the past and the future is existing in this moment, but within different frequencies. So a civilization that's at the end of their technological cycle could build a submarine that changes its voltage and materializes in that same location, just into our timeline. And then fucking, it's crazy.
That was well articulated. I like that.
The big defense contractor that does all the UFO stuff, like for the military and the government, is in La Jolla. And out in front of their building, they have 2 8-foot-tall Egyptian statues. And one is holding a pyramid in his hand, and it says the past. And one's holding a pyramid in his hand, and it says the future. And they're big bronze statues in front of this company. In this company, I have on one of these tapes a girl testifying how they put billions of dollars or millions of dollars into UFO-related programs, and they create them, and they're fake. So when they get audited by the General Accounting Office of the United States government, it just looks like all the money's going into fucking more helicopters, but it's really going into like UFO-related programs. And there's Egyptians in front of the building, dude holding pyramids and saying the past and the future. I have people from the government talking about aliens. They're fucking real.
Something you got to realize is, for example, the 6th biggest defense contractor in the world, at least they used to be 6, is a company called Science Applications International Corporation, SAIC. Their headquarters are actually in San Diego, and in the front of the building, you have an obelisk coming out of a fake lake and 2 Atlantean on thrones, and they're both holding pyramids, and one says the past and one says the future. And they're 8-foot-tall statues. It's fucking nuts, by the way.
The same people as the old body?
True.
So why? Why have they changed members? What's the motivation?
There's a switchover between 2 secret societies going on. One is handing reins over to the other, and it has been long planned. However, it's not been long known by me, but it's been long planned, probably decades. I'm certain it has to have been for decades.
So Majestic is ruled by a secret society, is what you're saying?
Well, Majestic has been the most famous, next to probably the Freemasons, secret society of itself. And there are many of the Freemasons who inhabit the Majestic as a consequence of their relationships. The 2 things are happening at the same time. And so their philosophies then, the philosophies of these associated secret societies like the Scottish Rite and the York Rite, are then imparted into the secret society known as the Majestic.
So what's the quarrel between...
Because you bring who you are to wherever you are.
Sure. But what's the quarrel between, say, the Majestic Society or group and the Illuminati?
That is a real good, and it's the best question to be asked. Even more importantly than the differences between the J-Rods, because this impacts us, I think, now. Many members of the upper echelon, and I don't mean the hard-working people who work on construction sites, for God's sakes, but many people who are in the upper echelon of the Masonic movement, both York and Scottish Rite, have accepted a philosophy which is Luciferian in context and history. Many of the people who are not directly then involved with the Majestic, who are also associated with that Luciferian philosophy, have rubbed up against each other for decades, probably even longer. So somewhere along the line in history, there was a schism between those individuals who have accepted a Luciferian history, Luciferian philosophy, mixed with other secret society people who have not, that ended up in the Majestic, and people who have accepted a Luciferian, almost like a different denomination, if you will, accepted a Luciferian philosophy, who are not associated with the Majestic. In other words, we've got dirty coins on both sides.
Okay. And when you say a Luciferian
Now,
philosophy,
meaning a materialistic, and for lack of a better term, when it comes to the actual European Illuminati, satanic philosophy, where they've given their lives, their families, their sacred honor to this satanic thought of creating a world order under the person that they consider the true God, which would be a Luciferian figure. Now, these people have also, separating them from the dirty coins in the Majestic side, these people have also been accepting of the influence of the P45 rogues, who want to justify their own history by our demise of moving from timeline 1 over to timeline 2, a catastrophe. And so the differences between the Majestic group, some of which there have been these Luciferians mixed in, and the true Illuminati group, and they're not even really true Illuminati. I mean, that's a word that comes back meaning enlightened ones, and these people are not enlightened. They're simply under the influence of a false light. That the differences between the two then have raised itself to rancor, even though they share much in common with each other. However, on the Majestic side, you have a lot of God-fearing people too. A lot, and I'm not talking about specifically here the 12. I'm talking about the line people, the people that we've worked with. Good people to the bone, to the soul, who want nothing but good for the world.
so basically what you're talking about is there seems to be an alliance between, for lack of a better word, the so-called Illuminati group that is satanic followers, and the P45s, what you call the P45s, and the Majestic group, which, even though it has some members from the Illuminati, basically is siding with the P52s.
Yeah, I wouldn't really call them I would say that they are Freemasons who have accepted the Luciferian influence. In other words, I personally disagree with it. The Luciferian influence, but are still acting as good people.
For the benefit of humanity.
For the benefit of humanity, exactly. And then there are some that I've interacted with who are involved with the so-called true Illuminati in Europe that are God-fearing people too. There's dirty coins and there's polished coins on both sides. However, the dirty coins make up the vast majority of the group on the European Illuminati side.
Okay, so what is, now let's get to the timelines and explain just briefly, since this gets over into the future and 2012, what the P45s, meaning they are from the future, 45,000 years ahead of
45,000 years ahead on a separate timeline than what we are presently on, but a timeline that we could transition over to from where we are now. So, if we are to accept that we transition, God forbid, from timeline 1 to timeline 2, they would be considered 45,000 years and 52,000 years, respectively, ahead of us. The individuals who dumped near Roswell, New Mexico, back in the 40s, were approximately 24,000 years ahead of us in timeline 2. And that was a mission return, an Earth-to-Earth time travel mission.
That we're on timeline 1, I'm assuming you're saying. And we're headed for 2012, and theoretically, a catastrophe that may or may not happen.
Right around now, yeah.
Right around now?
Yeah.
And this catastrophe, has this got anything to do with Planet X?
I don't know. There is the most honest answer I can provide you. I know of a lot of lore about a rogue planet coming in. However, the material that I've actually seen on a repetitive crossing, if you will, of Earth with catastrophic influences happens not only because of a matter of physics, of rogue, and I don't mean this toward like J-Rod Road, but rogue crossings near Earth asteroids or comets. What I have heard is that to precipitate the catastrophe, there would be, as we pass into, is that to precipitate the catastrophe, there would be, as we pass into the plane of the Milky Way, some sort of energetic burst through the plane of the galaxy by virtue of wormholes that are that travel through the plane of the galaxy from the center of the galaxy, which have been depicted in ancient lore called the serpent rope, even of the ancients. And that the serpent rope would return at the time of the end of the Mayan calendar, revealing, and there are several perspectives as to what it will reveal. But that during this same time, the history of the J-Rods record that this burst will cause a disruption in the sun, and that concomitantly with energetic bursts from the sun and from the wormholes which would be passing through our planet, that there would be a disaster provoked by virtue of these time travel devices, the Stargate devices, and the time viewing devices, the looking glass devices, spontaneously turning on and directing an inappropriate amount of energy into the crust of the Earth, precipitating a geophysical disaster. This geophysical disaster, in accordance with the history of the J-Rods, the Orions, record that over 4,157,000,000 die over a several-year period by virtue of a geophysical shift in the crust.
So this is what
I get numb when I think of numbers that way.
Is trying to be prevented. Is this right?
Yes. Very true.
And how is it going to be prevented?
By the disabling and the destruction of such technology, that we will naturally then pass through these serpent ropes. The bursts will occur, whatever that means. I haven't physically seen it. But the bursts will occur, and there would be an imparting of energy to our planet that will gradually, naturally cause changes in the human species and the life on our planet. And that these changes would be positive changes to our people. And I frankly think that it's already happening. There's a rise worldwide and I don't think it's just given the size of the population increase, But there is a rise in very spiritual, talented people. There is a rise in savants, the indigo children. It's definitely, from what I've seen from reading about them, a real phenomenon. These children are of a new time, and I think they're of the timeline time. We're seeing, I think, in these children, these great kids, an expression of what we will be in our own future, our next kind of step ahead. You're not looking millions of years ahead or anything like that, but our next step ahead. And it's a wonderful rise in consciousness that I think will precipitate the next renaissance for our people. I see it happening. The numbers that we received before the Looking Glass was shut down, dismantled, was that there would be a 19% probability with an 85% confidence that the disaster would occur, that there would be a transitioning from timeline 1 to timeline 2. But that then means that there is an 81% chance that it won't. And so the individuals who want to carry the negative, I'm convinced that it's going to occur, are not presenting the facts. The facts are, this is the material that we have available, that we know.
So what you're saying is the Illuminati, to get back to that thread,
Yes.
is basically the side that believes that the transition is going to occur from one timeline to the other.
Not only do they believe that it will occur, they want to provoke it.
But how does it benefit them to provoke it? Why should they want to be P45s?
They don't. The living ones don't. They're looking at the P45s as a means to an end for them. They're not going to live that long. They're just going to live a normal human life and die. So they want the control for themselves. The fact that the P45s, that's how immoral these people are. The fact that the P45s are wanting us to, at their stage in their own development, have a disaster which justifies their own history, is being used as a means to an end by the Illuminati, who would like to see that the population is culled so that they can gain greater control. They don't care.
So, okay, so
they just want for themselves. There are really human beings that don't care, or that care that little.
So what you're saying is the Illuminati want the catastrophe to occur,
Yes.
so that a certain number, 3/4 is the number I've heard, of humanity dies. They get the earth
history
to
reads
themselves.
about a little over 2/3. That's what the history
Okay,
of the J-Rods
2/3.
actually read.
All right, 2/3. And then what? I mean, they've still had to live through earth changes and cataclysms, right?
Right. But these people are also the ones who have their guaranteed positions in the safety zones, underground facilities, etc. And so they are presumed. It is not known for certain, but they are presumed to actually then be the progenitors, if you will, of the people who become the J-Rods.
Understand. But in a sense, there is a thought that, in a sense, the P45s, that side of humanity, possibly becomes almost soulless.
They become repressed. They still have their same souls, because even after 7,000 more years of development, I could see the soul. I mean, as you see the heart of another human being, I could see the soul in Kaela. So it didn't.
But Kaela was not
back.
a P45.
No, he was a P52. But that just means that he was 7,000 years along the T2 timeline from when the P45s
So
were in
he used
existence.
to be, or his people used to be a P45.
Yes.
And a P46, 47, 48.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So the soul didn't go away and then come back. It's been there. But then, you know what? Look, you can say that some people are soulless. The Nazis. How much soul did they have when they threw my grandpa onto a car? How much soul did they have? Well, you know what? They had a human soul. as black as apparently what it was, or as covered over in their demented brains. But I still pray for them that they've been made whole with God. But they still had their souls, even though it was repressed.
So,
in like manner, the P45s have a soul.
okay. Well then, okay, you've talked about the P52 Orions and the P52 J-Rods. Am I right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, what causes the split? Because the Orions, I'm thinking, are the blonde Nordics.
They're the ones that prefer to stay out of the safety zones when it happens. They are the survivors who do not go underground.
Are these good? Is this a good division of humanity? I mean, the P52 Orion
I don't consider
Nordics.
any division of humanity good. I consider them the more positive.
Division of humanity? I mean, the P52 Orion Nordics.
I don't consider any division of humanity good. I consider them the more positive of the two because I consider the positive aspects of humanity to be the spiritual aspects.
So you're saying the Nordic line is spiritual?
Yeah,
more
extremely,
spiritual.
Extremely, yeah.
Okay. So how does the Nordic line, I mean, you say they stay out.
They actually move off from Earth first. The J-rods, or the precursors to the J-rods, stay on Earth for a great deal of time. Well after 24,000 years from the time of the transition, like 24,000 years from now, because there were 24 or so thousand years ahead of us when they crashed in Roswell in 1947. Those were 24s. They stay. The Orions move off first to the place after the reestablishment of a society on the surface of the Earth. Technology is refurbished, etc. They move off to the place where the Ark is held.
Which is where?
Our nearest body, the Moon.
The Moon.
Where on it, I'm not going to say.
Okay. Well, this
Because I'm
gets
having
into...
to defend against the possibility of Timeline 1 transitioning over to Timeline 2 in a manner different than I've been told. And I'm not going to be the person who hands off the wrong information.
So, okay, but you're saying the Nordics are going to get off Earth if the catastrophe happens, or regardless,
They leave after.
after the catastrophe happens.
Presumably several thousand years after it happens. They
Several
leave.
thousand
They-
years.
yes,
I
they
was
move to
getting the
moon.
impression you were talking about
not
them
really.
going on spaceships or something.
No. They move off to the moon several thousand years via spacecraft. They get to the place where the Ark was held, and they reestablish a new community. From there, they move to Mars. From Mars out to Orion.
So
Talking a lot of time here.
the face on Mars, is this, are we looking at something that was left behind by the Nordics?
Mm-hmm.
So we're looking
as best
forward.
as I know.
We're looking forward to our future when we're looking at the ruins.
Yeah, we're looking at a paradox of their ruins, which they left on another planet.
In our future.
In our future.
In our possible future.
Yep.
Okay, well, to come back to this
She's
future...
actually got the best command of this information of anyone in the public with whom I've spoken.
I know. Thank you. That's a very sweet thing to say.
It's honest.
Thank you. We've got, I'm getting another question here from our small audience, and I must say that Bill Ryan is...
Bill Ryan?
Bill Ryan is also sitting with me and listening to this amazing information and asking some good questions.
When we're looking at Mars, are we therefore
Mars.
looking at the future?
Now the question
I
is
just don't
this.
understand that. We're looking to
The
a telescope.
question of the day is that what is going to happen? What is going to happen when the transition occurs and we either continue on one or, God forbid, number 2 happens? If number 2 happens, we're not going to be worried about Mars. We will have much more important things to worry about at that moment. Let's say, God willing, and I think we will, remain on timeline 1. What's going to happen with our imagery of Mars? I think we'll probably remember taking images of these anomalous structures. And there have been some anomalous structures imaged on the moon as well. So I think we're probably going to remember that. At least I think so. If we don't, it's not going to matter now, is it?
So what you're saying is we're going to go back to the idea that there is no face on Mars.
Or there will be a face on Mars, and it will be presented to us at that moment as something different. Maybe the bricks will turn to rocks, and we will get there and find out that all of these beautiful ruins, including the scorpion. If you don't think it's a scorpion, tell me what it is. Okay, I'll show you the images from Star City on the top of this pyramid. If it's not a scorpion, tell me what it is. But perhaps we're going to get there and we're going to find out that all of this presumed architecture that we are seeing by virtue of the geometry that we're attempting to apply to these images is nothing more than rocks. That we've never been there. Because at that moment, because we had not transited over to timeline 2, that we have never visited there until we finally put, quote unquote, man on Mars.
But there's a profound paradox here, because
there is.
Because what I hear you saying is that we're looking through telescopes where we're receiving light in present time with a few minutes difference that's being reflected off objects on the surface of Mars, but we're actually looking at a possible future.
That's right.
I don't understand.
There are impacts into our timeline now which have occurred. This is the information that I received not only from Kaela, but also from the material within Majestic. There are impacts into our reality now, our timeline now, by virtue of the amount of time travel which has occurred. Every time they have gone back in time, they have caused small paradoxes which have built up as our reality that we now perceive. In other words, there is actual Newtonian superimposing. And that is a frightening thing to me.
So it's almost like putting money in the bank, though, every time they come from the P45s, in a sense. Their timeline becomes
as creating a larger heap of manure.
Well, okay, but emphasis appreciated. However, nonetheless, it is like a deposit towards the actual occurrence happening. I don't know. They are agents of change, in a sense.
They are agents of change, as all human beings are agents of change. But I don't know whether there is a cause-effect, whether there's a nexus between cause and effect having to do with their amount of time travel and the superimposition which is going on in our reality and the disaster itself. I think that the disaster itself, from everything that I've read and heard, is a direct consequence of the technological aspect of bringing too much energy toward us in a non-natural manner.
Okay, well, basically you're saying there's two timelines. I mean, I'm sure you're aware of the work of physicists now that are saying, look, if you can have two timelines, you can have 2 million.
Well, don't we really have 3 or 4? I'm discussing 24,000s. I'm discussing 45,000s, 52,000s, and present day. How many timelines are that? Because these people moved ahead linearly in their timeline. Just because we want to call it timeline 2 doesn't mean that there are other effects or superimposings which are occurring on different realities during even their own timelines.
Exactly. I mean, there's a sense at which what you're talking about is not so much that the P45s, for example, timeline won't exist, as it will actually separate from our reality and become more like a parallel reality instead of an intersecting one.
From what I understand, the people who were just prior, which would be us, according to their history, to the people who were just after, exist as a straight vector of time. So in other words, God forbid, the catastrophe occur, it will just appear as tomorrow the catastrophe occurs, etc., and we move forward, and changes start occurring in the earth. There is a disaster, there is a loss of huge life, etc. We won't probably feel anything change aside from the fact in the earth there is a disaster, there is a loss of huge life, etc. We won't probably feel anything change aside from the fact that we'll all be running scared for our lives. Aside from that, I have no explanation.
Okay, you're saying if the catastrophe occurs.
Yeah.
But if it doesn't occur, there's still the element in which we have been visited by a timeline in which really does exist in a sense. And how do you unmake something which has been made? That's kind of, I mean, it's more of a philosophical question.
I don't know, and all I can do is defer to the Creator on that issue. Because all we do is perturb.
What has told you that this is true?
All of the above.
Okay.
It's all of the above, plus information directly from Majestic, I think.
Why is Majestic in a place to know that this actually happens or doesn't happen? In other words, you've got the looking glass technology that they use, and you use, and you were instrumental in discovering. Were you in?
No. This is an original technology which was derived from ancient cylinder seals by people from our future who provided it to us, meaning the rogues, the P45s.
Okay, the people from our negative future.
That's right. We wouldn't have this lovely technology if it wasn't planted in our past for us to use now. The entirety of the technology must either be disabled or destroyed.
In other words, to unmake the technology.
Until at least after we pass through this time period. There is no way. From the deceit, the conceit, the avarice, and the greed that I have been around over the last 20 years amongst the good side of these two dirty coins, there is no way that they're not going to start this equipment back up again if it's usable after this. Of course they're going to. Come on. I mean, they've got this, it's like a magic box to try to see into the future. What they're going to do with our future with regard to that, I've got no clue. I have no power over it, and I have no clue.
Okay, so this looking glass technology comes from cylinder seals.
Originally, yes.
How?
Originally, it was a series of instructions for accessing the wormholes which naturally pass in the hyperspace in which we find ourselves. And from there, they worked on the technology. They built the equipment from the instructions. After building the equipment from the instructions, they began to tweak it and find different things out about it. One of the things that they found is that they could actually use it as a peering portal, like a peering glass, if you will, to see different aspects of not only the future but the past.
Are these Sumerian?
I would say that they slightly predate Sumerian time frame, but that some of the information which came down from cylinder seals that slightly predated the Sumerian time frame were then recopied in Sumerian seals as well. And those cylinder seals, oh yes, and those cylinder seals, to the best of my knowledge, have all been obtained.
From Iraq?
Some of them from Iraq, yes.
Some of them from Egypt?
Some of them from Egypt, some of them from other countries where they were being stored. And I really don't want to get my country into too many problems here.
And you've got, go ahead.
For a second, I want to reiterate, the rogue P45s jumped back, seeded this technology, because that's what they wanted to do, was to seed the land to help facilitate the catastrophe. Because by placing this technology available, they knew that it would be utilized, and as long as we as people, oh my God, they wanted to go back and seed the technology, because they felt that as people we would be unable to break ourselves away from using that technology.
How is it that this technology is being utilized now? And isn't, if you're talking about a wormhole, isn't it the same thing as a Stargate?
Essentially, yes. The technology is not being utilized now. Anywhere we find it, we take it.
Who's we? Because you have warring factions. You've got the Illuminati on one hand. You've got the Majestic on another.
We as the United States as part of the UN. NATO. I don't really want to comment too much about NATO and who's controlling the NATO alliance at this point. But
isn't it a fact that the Illuminati
we're doing most of the lion's share.
Would be stealing back this looking? I mean, if they want it to happen, their objective would be to steal these cylinders and get them on, so that they could use the looking glass technology.
They can't show up as an aggressor to steal anything back. So what they do is they vote against us.
How does that stop looking glass technology?
It plays out in the UN. Well, we had looking glass technology and portal, actual Stargate technology in Iraq as late as the start of 2003. And a lot of countries didn't want us to enter Iraq. We did, though, didn't we?
Right. But how is it that, in other words, it sounds like...
Omar just handed his two over. We just told him that we were going to make him rich beyond avarice. And he was a little smarter than Saddam, that's all. And so what he did is he handed them over and says, "Oh, please come into my country." He says, "Look at my equipment to make sure that I'm not making any weapons of mass destruction." Meanwhile, out the back door goes the two that Saddam actually had transferred over to him.
Cylinders.
Equipment. Stargate. Activating technology.
Portal.
Yeah, for them to experiment with. They were experimenting.
But if the looking glass technology is the same thing, is accesses a wormhole. The technology accesses a wormhole.
Yes.
It also accesses Stargates.
Well, that's essentially the same thing. I've been using the term Stargates technology as meaning a machine that accesses a wormhole by spreading out the energy, the strange matter, or whatever it is, and I'm not a physicist, that spreads it out in a compatible way to either communicate through it or passage of information. And that includes also...
But it occurs naturally. Stargates occur naturally.
Indeed, they do.
So how do you close those?
You don't, and we don't want to. We don't want to. The history reads that the natural passage of us through this energetic space is a good thing. But it's our use of technology which provokes the catastrophe.
So it's
our enhancement of this natural system, inappropriate enhancement, which provokes the catastrophe. And so, no, we don't want that to happen. I think that the energetics that we're passing through is part of what's happening to us naturally that's changing us in a positive way. It's part of the loving cosmos that we're part of. I think that's probably one of the factors, not all, but one of the factors for the rise of these beautiful children, the indigo children. And I'm all for it.
So we want to leave the Stargates, the natural Stargates. They are leaving those alone.
Right. We want to keep our hands off from nature. Pull our hands away. Get it away from the fruit of the tree of life, so to speak. Get it away and just let nature happen during this time. That will be a good thing. However, we also have people who oppose that because they want what they want.